Okay, well, it's around 3 a.m. and I'm out here working on the pickup again. I just thought I would kind of post a little update on a few things I'm working on. First off, as you can see, I'm here with my feeler gauge and I'm setting the ring gaps on these rings. I've since the last video, I've discovered some interesting stuff. As you can see, I'm over here working. These are the total seal rings, and I'm just going through and gapping them on the original rings. And here's what's kind of interesting. These are all the original rings over here from the engine. And the other night I was doing something and I took one of the original rings and I put it down into the cylinder here just to see how that little piston would work, you know, as far as squaring up the rings. And they do sell different tools and what have you that you can use, but using one of the old pistons really works the best. I just took this one up and cleaned it in the sink. The reason it works well is because at least what I do is I check the ring gap at 3 different locations. So I take the piston, and you can see it. Oh, here, let me go grab a piston here. So I take, and these are the Keith Black pistons that I'm running over Here. I have to excuse the state of the pickup truck bed here. So you can see these are the Keith Black hyper-eutetic pistons. I picked these up from Summit Racing. But on these, they have the piston rings, the second ring anyways, down a little bit further. It's got a little channel in here to accept gases and things. Now, these have a little skirt on them, an anti-scuff kind of material. And then I'm actually gonna bead blast these and ceramic coat them with a titanium piston coating, ceramic titanium piston coating from Cerakote. I have to spray it on and cure it in the oven and what have you. So I'll have a different video about that. But on these pistons, the rings sit down a little bit further, and so I measure the depth of the rings down based off of the piston stroke, which is 89 millimeters, in addition to where the rings sit. So the second compression ring, for example, I think it's 16 millimeters down. So then if the stroke is 89 millimeters on the truck, on the 22RE, then I want to take a measurement of the compression ring. You know, what is the gap when it's down 105 millimeters, you know? So anyways, that's why I use the pistons, because you go way far down and come back up. So when I was kind of testing that out to see how much tension there was on the original piston rings, I noticed that the gap was like 60 thousandths of an inch. And what that tells me is that whoever built this motor, and I don't know who did it, you know, the guy I bought the truck from said his friend had put a motor in and they had gotten out of a junkyard, so who the heck knows what the history is. But here's what I do know. Somebody bored the engine over and 20 thousandths over, and they used the correct size pistons. You know, you can look at the old pistons here, the ACL pistons. When they're clean, they have a number on them. On top, 20 thousandths. But whoever did it, they didn't use oversized rings. They used stock. They used the rings for what a stock piston would be, and thus a stock engine bore. And so you should have a, you know, around 20 thousandths roughly, or maybe 18 thousandths. But because they were using rings that were designed for cylinder bore that was standard instead of 20 thousandths over, and they stuck the standard rings in, the gap was like 60 thousandths. Not only that, And as you probably seen in the other videos, the oil ring or the upper piston ring was broken. But so not only do you have a gap that's way 3 times or at least twice what you want to run on a stock piston, but you don't have the correct tension. So if you go back and see all my videos where I'm trying to do all kinds of fancy stuff to cut the oil consumption down, I basically was fighting a losing battle because whoever did the engine had the wrong the wrong rings in it. Now, also another thing I've done here is I have upgraded to LCE Engineering's H-beam rods. I just got finished balancing these. They came out of the box pretty good. They were all within 0.6 of a gram of each other, from highest to low. So that's pretty good. I attempted to measure the big ends and the little ends, but given this is a truck motor, I decided to just balance them to each other. So they're all balanced. I just took off 0.4 of a gram along the bottom, not enough to affect the strength of the cap or anything. These are nice because they come with the I don't know if you can see it there, but they come with the ARP heavy duty rod bolts. I'm going to torque these down, and then I have a meter that I measure the stretch with, but probably around 63 to 65 foot-pounds should get the right stretch on those bolts. The nice thing with these is they're very accurately machined on the big end, which I liked. I was having a little bit of trouble getting the right combination of bearings. I got about five or six packs of bearings. I ultimately was able to mix and match my Mala cleveite bearings. These are not the tri-metal bearings, but these are the bi-metal bearings. But they're very nice quality. I've got them stacked up the way they go into the motor, but you can see here I measured them out, and then I mixed and matched them until I got the proper oil clearances relative to how the rods go on the journals and what the clearances are from the factory on the big ends. And I've written down the clearances, so you see on rod number 2, for example, is 2.2053, and then on this one, same thing, and then on number 4, I think it was 5.5, yeah. So, and then I can't remember what number 1 was. Oh yeah, 5.2. So there's a variation of 0.3 of an inch across the big ends of the rods, and then I've got a variation of a few tenths on the bearings. Also, one of my journals is around 4/10,000ths smaller than the rest for some unknown reason. And so by mixing and matching the bearing halves against the journals and against the big ends of the rods, I was able to achieve the oil bearing clearance I wanted, which was 2.3 thousandths of an inch oil clearance. And I think one of the rods was 2.4, but it's fine. So I'm real happy about that. I'm going to be putting the pistons in after I ceramic coat those. I still have the cylinder head to work on, but it's coming along. And this evening, I'm just sitting here sizing up these rings for the engine. And like I say, I was shocked and amazed to find out that the motor that somebody had put the wrong size piston rings in the motor. That's a first for me. I've never seen that before. And that probably explains the copious amounts of oil that the truck was burning this time. So I'm real interested to see, with the new rings and everything, the proper size and the new pistons and all that, how the motor's going to behave. Now, I will add that if you see my other videos, you know that there's a little, it's about 10 thousandths deep little scratch in there. You probably can't really see it right now. But what I decided to do, I was going to take the block out and bore it over, and I don't really want to do that. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll get tricky and I'll use some either 55 or 99 nickel rod and TIG braze in. little patch, and I was like, don't really want to do that either unless the block is out, sitting upright on a table and I can float in the nickel. And then when I was buying the ceramic titanium coating for the pistons, which I'm going to spray on the top of the pistons, I thought, oh, you know what might be kind of slick is if I just get some air cure coating, piston coating, ceramic coating, and I just very lightly float it into the cylinder wall in that one little spot that's scratched. Now, the application data sheet for the ceramic says you can spray it up to 2 mils thick, which is 2/1000ths of an inch. I need to go more like about 10 or 11 thousandths. So I was thinking if I just put a few coats of that ceramic stuff in that little scratch on the cylinder wall and then let the piston ring kind of do its thing when I fire up the motor, I'll bet you that stuff will hold up. And if it doesn't, it's just more or less a paint. So, I mean, it is a ceramic paint, but it's more or less a paint. And I think that might buy me a little bit of improvement in cylinder number 2 there. So that's kind of where things stand. I should have the rings all gapped across all 4 cylinders here pretty soon. Slowly but surely knocking down all the little projects that I need to put the motor back together. Let me think if there's anything else. Oh, the other thing, let me see here, where is it? I gotta track it down here. The other thing was oh, here it is right here. The other thing was I decided to order a adjustable cam gear from LCE Engineering. They're probably wondering why I just don't order everything at once and save them having to box everything over and over again. But I'll be lying in bed and think, oh, it'd be kind of cool for the 22i. And the most recent thing is this adjustable cam gear. Now, this gives you 10 degrees retarding or advancing of the cam. Now, I've built motors in the past and timed in the cams and had adjustable cam gears and stuff, and I never really felt like it did a heck of a lot. But at the same time, this was only $89. So what are you gonna do? I'm gonna run it, and you see I've already got it adjusted full tilt over here. I'm gonna run it probably 10 degrees. I shot an email off to Tony over at LCE Engineering to ask him, based on my motor and this and that and the other thing, am I going to get into any trouble with 10 degrees? Now, if you count these teeth, there's 36 teeth. So that means each tooth difference is 10 degrees because there's 360 degrees in a circle, obviously. So I kind of could have accomplished the same thing by just taking the stock sprocket here and let's see, retard the cam. So I could have just clicked it back one tooth and I'd have kind of the same thing. And I was going to do that actually, but the only reason I didn't do that was because I thought if I get the motor back together and I don't like it, then it's going to be a lot harder to pull everything back off and adjust it back to stock. And what if I want some sort of to mess around with something in the middle? So I'm going to give it a try somewhere probably between 8 and 10 degrees retarded and see kind of how that impacts the motor. Now, without going into great detail, basically if you advance the cam, it gives you a little more torque down low, and if you retard the cam, it gives you a little more, it kind of takes the curve on the dyno and tilts it this one way or the other. So one way you get more top end, and the other way you get less top end and more low end torque. Now, my motor, for whatever reason, my motor it refuses to rev much past about 5,300 RPMs. And I don't know if that's a function of it not breathing or what, but I figure I can play around with the cam timing and see if that maybe will help the motor spin up a little bit more. Now also, these connecting rods weigh a little bit less, and it adds up. These are 600, if I remember correctly, 676 grams after balancing per connecting rod. The stock ones are more like, I think it was more around 750 grams. So you're saving 70 to 75 grams or something like that per rod. And what's that? 300 grams, you know, so that's, we can ask Siri how much 300 grams is, but I think it's a pound or something like that. So that's a considerable weight savings off of these rods. These rods are also rated for 400 or 500 horsepower, which I won't be getting anywhere close to that. The other thing is the Keith Black pistons over here will bump up the compression ratio a little bit to 9.7 to 1 instead of the factory 9. So that'll be kind of nice. And these are pretty well made little pistons. Also, I do like that the second compression ring is down. I think it's 1.5 millimeters lower than the stock pistons, and that helps me out a whole bunch on that cylinder number 2, because the majority of the little damaged area from the previous problem with the pistons and so forth is up a little higher. So that second ring on these pistons being down an extra 1.5 millimeters helps me out quite a bit. And the reason they do that is because you can see on their pistons they have a very nice little channel for expansion gases right in there. So anything that blows past the top ring will get down and have somewhere to go before it has to get through the bottom ring. And that'll help prevent what's called ring flutter on the top compression ring. So I'll take all the help I can get. Speaking of, and just to wrap this video up here. Oh, and I was going to show, I mentioned earlier, here, let me show this thing. I got this off of Amazon. Got some of my tools here. So a few little things. I got my OHAS calibration weights, you can see, for calibrating my scales and so forth. And then I've got some of my micrometer stuff over here for getting the bearings together. This is kind of a cool little guy that I picked up off of Amazon. What this is actually is, this is actually a digital caliper for measuring brake disc rotors without having to take your wheel off. So the way this is designed is it can slip up into the you know, between the spokes of your wheel and let you get a quick read on the thickness of your brake rotors and see if it's time to turn them or anything. But what I'm going to use it for is I use it for measuring the stretch on the bolts, and you can see it gets in there real nice and lets you get a reading on there. It has a hole function. I checked it against my gauge blocks, and it seems to be repeatable down to at least half of a 10,000ths, if not a little better. So that's plenty good for checking rod bolts. I like the fact that with this little hook, I can get up in the crankcase area, even when the rods are installed, and get a reading on what they are. And you can see over here, here's some of my data from the other night. So these are the H-beam rods, the left and the right bolts, when they were installed from LCE Engineering at about 58 foot-pounds from the factory. And then when the bolts are free, the ARP bolts are free. So tremendously handy little guy. Picked it up off Amazon. For anyone who's interested, I'll put the link. And I think, as I might have mentioned, I think these are probably Eagle connecting rods. I don't want to misspeak, but they look suspiciously like the Eagle connecting rods. But I will say that they're very, very nice quality, and I'm very impressed with them. Like I said, I got them directly from LCE Engineering, so I'm looking forward to getting those into the motor. And as mentioned, cylinder head is still in progress. I need to lap the valves. I have some diamond paste and compound that I'm going to do a real nice lapping job on the valves, and then we'll get this motor back together and get the truck back on the road. So that's the latest. should have another update, maybe, I don't know, a couple weeks. Like I say, I gotta take the Keith Black pistons and glass bead them, and then spray on the titanium, the ceramic titanium coating, and then bake that in the oven and all that jazz and stuff. So that'll kind of be the next step after I finish gapping these rings. Oh, and I wanted to mention, since the Keith Black pistons are hypereutectic pistons, you have to run a little bit bigger gap. I'm running 29 thousandths on the top ring, and about 34 thousandths on the second ring, just to help promote any blow-by gases getting out fast. Kind of the whole piston ring flutter unseating idea. You want to have the second ring a little bigger. And the hypereutectic pistons, they run a little hotter because they have a little bit more silicon content. So generally you run a little bit bigger ring gap than the stock pistons, maybe, just because you're dealing with a little bit more cylinder temperature, I think. Now I've carefully measured the cylinder wall taper and all the piston clearance. Everything is real good to go. So I'm measuring the ring gap at 3 points. So what I do is I start up here at about 10 millimeters down, and then I go down to about 55, and then about 105, and make sure my gaps are not, closing up on the way down and butting or anything like that. And for me personally, I rather run an extra 5 or 10 thousandths gap on the rings and have a little bit of insurance should the motor overheat, towing something or going up a huge hill or something like that, as opposed to running the gaps too tight and then having the rings try to expand and have nowhere to go, because you don't want to do that. That's bad news. And having a little bit having 5 or 10 thousandths more ring gap, even 15 thousandths more ring gap, you're not going to lose a heck of a lot of horsepower. We're only dealing with 135 or 140 horsepower here. Maybe you lose 1 or 2 horsepower tops, but even then I don't think so. So I like to err on the side of a little bit bigger ring gap and a little bit more margin of safety there on the motor. So okay, that's it for now. Gonna get back to work, gap in the rings here, and then we'll start getting things knocked down. Next video, we'll see if I have the coating on the pistons, and I can kind of show how that's all coming together. All right, as always, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to use the comment section below, and thanks for watching.